I spent my whole life giving love, time, money, and all of me until the night I heard my son laugh while someone called me their maid. It was a Thursday evening, the kind that smelled like roasted rosemary chicken and fresh linen. Jazz hummed softly through the speakers, candles flickered on a perfectly set table, and every corner of the house gleamed. I'd spent the entire day making sure it did, running errands, arranging flowers, restocking the wine rack. I didn't know we were hosting guests until Kayla, my daughter-in-law, casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, my parents are coming by tonight." It wasn't the first time she'd forgotten to tell me, so, like always, I shifted into quiet service mode, pressing napkins, chilling glasses, setting out the salad tongs. I wasn't part of the invitation, but I was part of the preparation. That's how it had been for years. I'm Helen, by the way, 68 years old, divorced for over 30. I raised my son Daniel alone. No child support, no safety net, just me, 2 jobs, and an unwavering belief that if I gave enough, loved hard enough, sacrificed deeply enough, I'd build a home that would never betray me. I used my parents' small inheritance to put a down payment on a house, the one we were standing in that night. My name on the deed, my money behind every appliance, every coat of paint. I welcomed Kayla into our lives with open arms when Daniel brought her home from college. She smiled sweetly, called me Mama H back then. That didn't last long. So there I was, standing in the kitchen with an empty bottle of Cabernet in my hands, a roast in the oven, and my hair still slightly damp from the quick shower I squeezed in before their arrival. I heard laughter ripple through the dining room as Kayla poured drinks. And then I heard it. "Oh, that's Helen," she said, waving a careless hand. "Our unofficial maid, keeps everything running around here." Her parents chuckled politely. Daniel laughed. "My son." I stood there frozen, fingers gripping glass. No one corrected her. No one said, "That's my mother." No one even looked toward the kitchen, toward me. I walked back slowly, placed the bottle on the counter, and excused myself without a word. Not because I was humiliated, that came later. Not because I was angry, not yet. But something in me quietly broke. And in that moment, I realized something even heavier than pain. I was invisible in the very home I built. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't confront, I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed and whispered to myself, "I'm done." I wasn't angry. I was finally awake. If you've ever felt erased inside your own family, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know your story too. The next morning, I got up like I always did. I brewed the coffee, fed the cat Kayla pretended to love, and wiped down the counter that still held the wine stains from the night before. I moved through the house like I had for years, invisible, quiet, useful. And then I stopped. Kayla came down in her yoga pants, phone glued to her hand, already mid-conversation about her next wellness event. She barely looked at me. When she finally did, it was with that wrinkle between her brows, the one that showed up any time I interrupted her curated world. I held out the keys, all of them. Front door, garage, mailbox, the spare hidden in the planter by the porch. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. I smiled. "Good luck paying the mortgage?" She blinked like I was speaking another language, but I didn't explain. I walked past the hallway photos I had framed, past the couch I had picked out, past the dining table where my son had laughed while I disappeared. I didn't take anything, just my purse, and the coat I wore the day I brought Daniel home from the hospital. He ran after me, barefoot in the driveway, called my name. But I didn't stop. I didn't slam the car door. I didn't cry. I just drove away. Because when you've given everything, every moment, every dollar, every second chance, and they still don't see you, the most radical thing you can do is leave. I moved into a small apartment that had been left to me by my great-aunt Miriam. It wasn't fancy. The wallpaper was yellowed, the heater groaned like an old man, and the floorboards creaked with every step. But it was mine. It smelled like dust, old books, and memory, not perfume and performance. It was silent. And for the first few nights, that silence felt like punishment. No one called. Not Daniel. Not even a "where did you go?" Not even a lie. I sat with that silence like an unwanted guest. Made peanut butter sandwiches. Slept on the couch because the bed frame in the back room was broken. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play music. I just sat. And then one night I opened an old kitchen drawer and found a spiral notebook. The kind I used to buy for Daniel every August. always on sale after the school rush. I started writing. Not a letter, not a list. Just thoughts I had never spoken aloud. I wrote about how I used to wait in the kitchen for him to say thank you, about the birthdays I planned that he barely remembered, about the time I cried in the garage because they went to a nice dinner without inviting me again. Pages and pages poured out, decades of silence unspooling in ink. And then something strange happened. I began to feel lighter, not better, but more real. Weeks passed like that, quiet, slow, healing in microscopic shifts. One morning, I went up to the storage attic to find a new light bulb. What I found instead was a rusted metal trunk, Miriam's old sewing box. Inside, fabric scraps, a packet of dried lavender, and at the bottom, a bundle of envelopes tied with a ribbon. Some were old utility bills and newspaper clippings, but one stood out. It had my name on it. The envelope was yellowed. Miriam's handwriting, small and deliberate, curled across the front. Inside were folded documents, fragile with age, a letter, copies of hospital forms, a photograph. It was a baby, wrapped in a striped hospital blanket. He wasn't Daniel. His name was written on the back, Matthew Anderson, born 1992, St. Agnes Hospital. I read the letter 3 times before I could fully understand what it said. Miriam had been a nurse at the hospital where I gave birth. That night, there had been confusion, a last-minute room change, mixed-up ID tags, something that felt off. She said she'd reported it but was brushed off. By the time she got answers, the babies were home. Years later, she found a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. A financial payoff in exchange for silence. The DNA report came later. Miriam had ordered it after finding records in her files that didn't match. And the results confirmed it. Daniel was not my biological son. My real son, the baby I was supposed to bring home, had been given to another family, and he'd grown up just a few miles away. Matthew Anderson. He owned a bookstore downtown. I had passed it hundreds of times. I sat back on the creaky floor and stared at the photograph. His cheeks were full, his eyes curious. My hands trembled, but not from shock, not even from grief. For the first time in years, I felt something else. I felt free, because finally all the pain made sense. The way Daniel pulled away, the way I felt like a guest in my own motherhood. Maybe it hadn't all been in my head. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't the one who failed. Maybe I was the one who was wronged. And now, I had a name, a face, a thread to follow, and I wasn't done yet. I started walking past the bookstore every afternoon around 4. Jameson Books, a little place tucked between a bakery and a consignment shop, with ivy crawling up its brick walls and a sandwich board out front that read, "Come in, the story's better inside." For weeks, I didn't step in. I just stood across the street with a coffee in hand, pretending to check my phone while my eyes followed him, Matthew. He didn't know who I was, but I knew who he was, my son, my real son. He looked around 30, maybe a little older, wore glasses, pressed shirts. His hair a little messy, like he had run his fingers through it too many times, but it was his smile that stayed with me, the kind of smile you give people when you mean it, when you're really listening. He helped every customer like they mattered, asked about their day, made them laugh softly. When he spoke about books, he leaned in like the words had a pulse. There was something familiar in the way he moved, something that felt like home. One Tuesday, I stepped inside. The bell over the door gave a soft chime. The air smelled like paper, cinnamon, and something floral, maybe an old candle burning behind the register. Matthew looked up from a stack of paperbacks. "Looking for anything special?" "Just browsing," I replied, unsure if my voice would hold steady. He recommended a novel about healing after loss. I bought it. He bagged it carefully like it was fragile. "You own this place?" "Sort of," he said with a smile. "My parents helped me get it started. I run it now." Of course they did. Of course he had help, support, stability, the kind I had worked myself raw to give Daniel, while he and Kayla burned through my efforts like gasoline. I started visiting the bookstore more often. Sometimes I bought a book. Sometimes I just sat in the corner with a coffee and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. He began recognizing me. We chatted about weather, new releases, favorite childhood stories. Nothing deep, nothing too revealing, but in every moment he showed me a gentle, consistent kindness that Daniel hadn't in years. And while those quiet afternoons unfolded like small chapters in my life, Something else was unraveling in the background, the story I had walked away from. Kayla. I began researching her business, Ascend with Kayla. All curated aesthetics and over-filtered inspiration. At first glance, she looked successful. Personal branding, coaching clients, yoga sponsorships. But behind the hashtags and buzzwords was a different story. Unpaid taxes, affiliate links posed as partnerships, fake testimonials. Even the home makeovers were staged in Airbnb rentals. Her success was built on illusion, and the house they lived in, still under my name. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, a woman named Cheryl. No nonsense, sharp-eyed, about my age. "I want to sell the house," I said, placing the deed and mortgage records on her desk. "I've given enough." "You still hold the title," she said, flipping through the documents. "We'll file immediately." That week, I began keeping records, screenshots, social media posts, business filings, public reviews. Not to hurt them, to protect myself, to prepare. I wasn't out for revenge. I was done being erased. And then one night, I printed it all. Tax records, forged invoices, business red flags. I placed them in a neat folder, attached a note on top that read, "Everything you think you know is a performance." Then I mailed it to Kayla's parents, the same people who once laughed in my kitchen while I poured their wine. Within days, the fallout began. Her Instagram grew quiet. Stories stopped, comments turned strange. Sponsorships disappeared. Her website went down for maintenance. Then a neighbor told me they saw her mother storming out of the house, red-faced, yelling into her phone. Daniel texted me, "Mom, are you okay?" Weeks of silence, and that's all he had to say. I didn't reply. A few days later, he came to my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, disheveled, pale, like someone losing control. He knocked once, then again. "Mom, please, just open the door." I stood on the other side, hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. Let him sit with the silence. I did, for years. Later that week, I agreed to meet him at a park on the edge of town. Neutral ground. No memories, no ghosts. Just a weathered bench and a dried-up pond. Daniel looked older, unshaven, shoulders hunched. "I don't know what's happening," he said. "Everything's falling apart." I said nothing. "I don't know how we got here." "You laughed," I said, "when she called me your maid." He winced. "I thought she was just joking." "She wasn't, and you knew that." He looked down. I didn't know what to say. "You didn't care to say anything." He exhaled hard. The silence between us was thick, heavy, but honest. I reached into my purse and handed him the envelope, Miriam's letter, the hospital records, the DNA report. He stared at it, then looked at me. "What is this?" "You weren't born to me," I said, "but I gave you everything." He opened the papers, scanned the words slowly. His face fell. This can't be true." "It is." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "No one thought I mattered enough." He sat still for a long time, then said, "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." Back at the bookstore, the bell above the door chimed again. Matthew stood behind the counter, unpacking a box of new titles. I walked over. "I need to tell you something." He studied my face. "Want to sit in the back?" he asked gently. We sat in the break room, tea kettle on the counter, a chipped mug, a mismatched chair. I handed him the envelope. He opened it and read everything in silence. When he finished, he placed the papers down and looked at me. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." "We can take it slow," he said after a pause. Then he smiled, small but real. "You want to stay for tea?" I blinked away tears. "I'd love to." The house sold faster than I expected. A full asking price. Clean deal. No negotiations. I didn't step inside again. Not even to say goodbye. I let the realtor handle everything, and when the check cleared, I quietly donated a portion of it to a foundation that helps women starting over. Women like me, who gave and gave until they disappeared. They called to thank me. I told them no thanks were needed, because giving now, this time, came from a place of power, not obligation. I kept visiting the bookstore. Matthew and I never talked about the envelope again, but something shifted between us. The way he looked at me when I walked in, the way he started saving my favorite pastries behind the counter. Our conversation stretched longer, a little deeper. Then one morning, I arrived to find him waiting by the back wall. A new wooden sign had been hung above a narrow doorway in warm, carved letters, "The Next Chapter." He handed me a small brass key. "It's a cozy reading room," he said. "A tea corner, quiet space for writing, for thinking, for belonging." I looked at the key, then back at him. "You gave someone your life, and they didn't see you," he said softly. "I do." I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside. The room smelled of cedar and hope. Shelves lined the walls, already half filled with memoirs and poetry. A worn leather chair sat in the center, beside a tea set and a notebook left waiting on the table. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, landing gently on the pages. I sat down and opened the notebook. My pen moved without hesitation. I wasn't writing someone else's grocery lists or to-do reminders. I was writing my story. No more silence, no more waiting to be seen. A few days later, Daniel sent one last message. "If there's ever a place for me in your life, I'll wait." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I wasn't slamming any doors. I had simply walked through the one that had always been mine and finally had the key. Sometimes healing doesn't come from getting back what you lost, but from finding what was meant for you all along. Thank you for listening. If Helen's story touched something in you, share this video, subscribe, and tell us your own story in the comments below. Your voice matters.